Hi everyone, my name is Angela, and today I'm here with Professor Bono, who is a professor at WashU, Washington University in St. Louis. Professor Bono, could you introduce yourself, maybe about like what you do and like some achievements that you've done?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on your program today, Angela. As Angela mentioned, I'm a faculty member in the Department of Psychological and Brain Sciences at Washington University in St. Louis, more affectionately known as WashU. And the courses that I teach in the psychology department focus on psychological health and well-being. A lot of times when people think about the field of psychology, they immediately think of mental disorders and what goes wrong with a person and the treatments that are necessary for someone suffering from depression or anxiety or other forms of distress, which is very important work. But more recently, there's also been a movement to try to understand emotions on the other end of the continuum, including those that can proactively build happiness and well-being and psychological strength. And that's where my teaching and research falls, kind of on that happier side of the continuum.
Yeah, so my first question is what is positive psychology, like maybe in your own definition?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, the first 100 years or so of psychology was really interested in what we might call negative psychology, understanding disorders of the mind. And so positive psychology says, once we've helped a person overcome the stressors of life and the other things that can be an encumbrance to their psychological health, that brings a person to kind of a zero or neutral point. It doesn't guarantee that they're necessarily going to have a flourishing life or a life marked by happiness and satisfaction. So positive psychology is all about understanding the behaviors and mindsets that can allow us to take up residence on that happier side of the continuum. And it's about testing the behaviors that are most effective in getting us there.
Yeah. My second question is, what inspired you to study the field of positive psychology?
Well, it probably traces its roots back to my days as a graduate student. I was initially studying something called implicit social cognition, which is every bit as boring as it sounds, because that's what the professor who I was working with was studying. And it was interesting, but it wasn't really anything that I was passionate about. And I just so happened to be offered an opportunity to work in the residential life office on campus, which I thought would be fun. When I was in college, I was an RA in the dorms. I thought this could be a sort of a break from the research that I was doing in psychology. But what I discovered is that I became interested in understanding the predictors of well-being among those students I was working with. Because some of the students were doing really well, they were happy, they were flourishing, they had good grades and strong friendships. Other students were really struggling as they were making their transition from high school into college. And I wanted to know more about what was it that was different about the students who were doing well and those who were struggling. So I mentioned that to my advisor. We had a conversation about it, and he helped me understand that those things I was interested in really were in the domain of positive psychology. And he suggested that I dedicate some of my research to that. It's a field that I really didn't know much about until I had an advisor who introduced it to me. And that's always the advice I give to anybody really interested in any field: is get a good mentor. Find people who care about you and who can help you realize things that you are interested in that you didn't even know that you were interested in. Because I was very fortunate to have an advisor who did that for me.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. As you kind of like began to study positive psychology, what's something that you like maybe learned and like maybe something that surprised you?
Sure. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is something that I think we all know on some level is important, but I was really surprised at just the magnitude of its importance, and that is getting a good night's sleep on a regular basis. I mean, we all know that on a day where we haven't slept well the night before, we're irritable and we're not able to focus as well. And on days when we have slept better, we feel good. But in terms of just how important sleep is for us, both for our physical health and especially our psychological health, that is something that I really came to understand is really central to a sense of well-being. A lot of people think, oh, I can't sleep, I can't get a full 8 hours of sleep because I have too much work to do. But the brain has too much work for itself to do for us not to be prioritizing that
Uh-huh.
behavior. If you look at brain activity when we're sleeping, the brain is incredibly active and is doing a lot of work to strengthen neural circuits that play out in things like emotion regulation and mental acuity. It transfers all the information we store during the day to the storage regions of the brain. And so it's really important for us to be prioritizing that in order to be at our best during our waking hours.
Yeah. So like to what extent do you think mindset is important in like just like daily life and like just in like the process of like someone trying to achieve their goals?
Yeah. We know that mindset plays a really important role in our overall well-being, and that especially comes to play into our days when things are not going well for us during adversity. That's another one of the, I think, among the key findings that I have discovered that I really try to impress upon people and remind myself on a daily basis that if you really want to know something about somebody's psychological strength, you don't look at them on the day when the sun is shining and they just got an A+ on a paper and they got their acceptance letter to their dream school and everything is going perfect. Everybody feels good on that day. If you really want to know something about somebody, you look at them on the day when they failed, on the day that they studied so hard for a test and they got a low grade, on the day when they had an argument with a friend, on the day that they get the rejection letter from an opportunity or a school that they really had their heart set on. Again, nobody feels good on that day. Everybody, will hurt from that. But it's in the mindset that people take in the aftermath of adversity that I think will figure prominently into their long-term well-being. And having a mindset that allows you to reflect on it and to be sad and to mourn and to grieve the loss, but then also to try to extract some meaning from it. And the people who are able to engage their social networks and reach out to a friend and process the adversity and to do so in a way that allows them perhaps even to emerge a little bit stronger, or at least with that mindset that allows them to keep persevering and saying, well, this test didn't turn out well, but I'm going to take what I learned from my missteps so that the next test I can study the correct way for and have a strong performance. Or I might not have gotten into the school I thought I was going to get into, but I got into this other school and I'm going to make the most of the opportunities there. It's those moments and that kind of a mindset, that mindset of resilience, that is another really important predictor of well-being in life.
Yeah, so kind of connecting to my previous question, like how do you think an individual can start to have a more positive mindset towards their like goals? Like for example, I think you kind of mentioned this. If like someone is trying to, I guess, receive an A in a class, but like they're trying all their best, but like they're not like reaching or like getting the score they want, like how do you think that they can, I guess, try to adapt a more positive mindset?
Yeah, well, and it's a really important question because I think people understand on some level, oh yeah, it's important to have a good mindset, but then in practice, there's the question of, well, how do you actually make that happen?
Right.
And you can think about resilience kind of being like a skill set that you get better at it by practicing it. And one way that you get better at it is by availing yourself of challenging experiences, taking, if you have the chance to take the honors or AP course versus, the easier course, go ahead and take the more challenging course and take advantage of things that are going to be challenging. You're not guaranteed to be successful at, but it goes back to something I said at the beginning, which is the importance of a good mentor. Because one of the things that a good mentor can do is provide examples of people who also have struggled. And then when they hit those roadblocks, they found a way around it or they found a way through it. And finding out the particular approach that they took, whether that was having a strong social support network who they could process things with, or going back and looking at the exam and saying, well, here's the material I studied, here's how I studied for it. But this was the approach that actually would have allowed me to be successful on the actual test. Having those models is incredibly important.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the overarching findings within positive psychology is just the importance of a strong social support network and having that willingness to process it with other people who can be that shoulder to lean on. And the other thing that I'll say here that becomes important is that sometimes you took the quantum physics class because you knew it would be a challenge, and maybe it's just not the class that you're going to get the A in. And part of wellness, I think, is giving yourself permission to acknowledge that we are humans, we are fallible, we're not going to be perfect at everything that we try. And so it's about recalibrating expectations and saying, okay, maybe I'm not going to have straight A's this semester, but that doesn't mean I should throw in the towel altogether. What is realistic to strive toward? Okay, maybe I strive toward the B or the B plus, and that's what I'm going to set my goal on because that's what's realistic for me. I think that if we approach life with sort of a binary, either I'm going to get an A plus and I'm a good person, or if I get anything below that, then I'm worthless. It's important to sort of say, okay, maybe I have to take a step back from this. Maybe this is the semester. It's not going to be perfect, but how can I at least, be the best version of myself, given the skills and talents that I do have?
Yeah. So, yeah, my next question is like when I'm sure like everybody feels this, but sometimes like everyone has days where they don't feel motivated, like they don't really, like, I guess for you, like they don't want to like go to work or like, yeah. So on those kind of days, how do you, or like, what do you do to, I guess, like kind of, I don't know, force yourself, or like how do you maintain like a like healthy mindset during those times?
Yeah, especially these days when there's all these
Right.
lockdowns and there's all these social distancing things that say that you don't have as much to look forward to necessarily, and there's just a lot to worry about right now. There's so much that's uncertain right now. So yeah, certainly I have those days. I think like everybody does. That's just some days you're just not motivated to do what you can. I do think that it's important to be mindful of those areas of life where you have true expectations and responsibilities to other people, so that if people are depending on you, I do believe that there's an expectation that if you just can't get out of bed in the morning, I think you at least need to like call somebody and let them know, hey, that project that I said I would have done by today is not going to happen. So I think it's also important to acknowledge though that those things exist on a continuum, that seldom are there days where we are either forging ahead full speed 100% or we're completely at 0%. It's a question of, well, maybe I'm not close to my best, but hopefully I'm not all the way at the other end too. What are the couple of things I can do
Mm,
to feel good about myself? Are there any little things I can do that will allow me to feel a sense of accomplishment, even if it's something really small, like I'm going to make my bed today, or I'm going to make a good healthy breakfast, or um, you know, finding small opportunities. Often the sense of satisfaction that you get even from the small things can at least motivate you to take a couple steps
right.
toward other projects, kind of like the snowballing effect. Yeah, and we all have those days, and I think that it's important to forgive ourselves and treat ourselves with kindness, and simultaneously acknowledge that sometimes there are consequences that we have to pay. And yeah, that means that maybe we're not going to get that promotion we thought, or we're not going to get the accolades that we might otherwise had we had a day that we were able to produce a little bit more, and that's okay too. I think that's it kind of goes back to the importance of a good night's sleep. It's kind of like hitting the reset button on a bad day and saying, all right, I wasn't at my best today. I'm going to forgive myself for that, but tomorrow, here's the plan. Here's the pecking order of all the tasks that I need to complete, and I'm going to do my best to get myself back on track toward working toward my goals. Because badgering ourselves with disappointment, if we've had a bad day the previous day, let that exist in the previous day. Don't let that carry over. Let the next day be a fresh start to work as hard as you can toward your goals for that day.
Yeah, so just to like, I guess like a final thought, do you have any advice or like suggestions to, I guess, and just like, I guess, current students, like teenagers that are maybe just like kind of struggling with like finding inspiration or motivation to like keep going? Do you have any like final words?
Yeah, I think that when you look at the research on well-being, if you had to reduce all of it down to a soundbite, and this has kind of been a recurring theme during our conversation. It's really important to develop strong social connections with other people, and
Okay.
I would encourage everybody, really of any age or background or anything, to prioritize that as much as possible. But keep in mind that it's important to be mindful of where you are developing those friendships. Um, and I don't in any way mean this to say that we shouldn't be on social media, but rather that we should be mindful of how we are using social media. I'm on social media, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter. Those can be wonderful tools,
Huh?
but be mindful of how much time you're spending on them, and also be mindful of how you feel after you spend a large amount of time on them.
Right.
And if your only interactions are taking place through a phone or through a screen, see if you can maybe instead use those as tools to learn what's going on in the community. How can I develop initial contact with people who might share my interests or my values or some extracurricular activity that I might want to pursue? And then use that as a way to say, hey, let's actually go meet up for lunch, or let's actually go participate in this activity together. When social media becomes a means to an end, that's, I think, where it's offering its greatest value. And so I think that that would be, one of the things that I would recommend is do what you can to develop strong interest with people who you admire, who you enjoy being with. There's this saying, you become the average of the 5 people you spend the most amount of time with. And so choose wisely, think about the kind of people who inspire you, the kind of people who have good habits, who seem to be living a life that you yourself would like to adopt some of the practices that they've incorporated into their lives. Spend time with them, and over time you will pick up on those habits. They'll become part of what you're able to do yourself.
Okay, so thank you so much for this interview for the Project Mindset Matters. I'm super honored to have you here. I hope you and your family are safe, healthy, and happy. Yeah, once again, thank you so much for this insightful interview.
It's been my pleasure, Angela. Absolutely.